Good morning, folks. I'm Eric Barassa with MAPC, and we will get started shortly. We'll just wait for a few more people to come in. We've got a lot of folks interested in this session today on MassDOT's Shared Streets program. So excited to get started soon. Good morning, everyone. We will get started just in another minute. We're going to wait for a few folks to join. We've got a good amount of people who registered and about 100 people in the meeting right now. Okay, I think we'll get started. Good morning. I'm Eric Barassa. I'm the Director of Transportation with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC. And we are really excited to be hosting this webinar today, which is focusing on MassDOT's next round of shared streets planning, shared streets funding. We're calling this Progress and Planning Ahead Shared Streets Initiatives in Massachusetts. A couple just housekeeping things before we get started. Please mute yourself. And many of you, I think, have participated in these webinars now. So please do that. We are recording this session, and we will be sending out the recording as well as the PowerPoint presentations after the meeting. If we are going to have at the end, we're going to have a question session. So feel free to put any questions into the chat as we go along, and we can get to those at the end. Or you can hold your questions and use the raised hand feature at the end, and I can call on you for that. We've got a great agenda this morning. We're first going to hear from Liza Cohen with Stantec and Lydia Housley with Tool Design that have been funded by the Barr Foundation to research the impact of many of these quick build streets improvements that have been funded by the MassDOT program. And we'll hear from them about best practices and the impact that these changes have had. And then we're going to hear from Kate Fichter and Jackie DeWolf at MassDOT about the details of this next round of the Shared Streets program. And like I said, then we'll have some time at the end to answer any questions that folks have about about the funding program. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Liza Cohen with Stantec.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Happy New Year. My name is Liza Cohen. I am a transportation planner with Stantec's Urban Mobility Group. And together with my collaborator, Lydia Housley, who's a transportation planner with Tool Design, we're going to talk about quick and creative streets. So Lydia can go to the next slide. Since June of 2020, we've been working as part of a collaborative to help communities plan, design, and implement quick build mobility projects in response to the pandemic. Much of that work has been made possible through technical assistance from the Barr Foundation, as Eric mentioned, and is provided at no cost to Massachusetts communities as part of the MassDOT Shared Streets and Spaces grant program. What's cool about that is we really had a front row seat as a lot of communities implemented these innovative projects over the last several months. And that helped position us to be lucky enough to work with the Barr Foundation on another undertaking, which was to develop evaluations of these projects to both showcase and understand their impacts, as well as create some replicable and hopefully easy metrics to do just that in your own communities. So if you go to the next slide, Lydia, these findings have been cataloged in a report, which was released in early December. You can find it at streetimpactma.org. The report has about 20 example projects together with evaluation metrics. It includes some regional and national insights from various polls and other publicly available sources, and is very visual, quick, and easy to read. So highly recommend that you go check it out for some inspiration. If you go to the next slide, we're going to walk through a few of those projects and some of the tools that we used for the evaluation. And then Lydia is going to take you through what some of those tools are and how you can include them in your own processes as you implement these types of projects. So first up is Barnstable, where in cooperation with Hyannis Main Streets, they converted a long stretch of Main Street to create a new walking area separated from street traffic using concrete barriers. This project was pretty cool because in addition to creating space for outdoor dining, it also created areas for sidewalk sales and for people to walk and other business activity. So the tools that we used to evaluate this project were in-person surveys. So, essentially stopping people on the street and asking what they thought of the project. And 90% of people surveyed said that they liked the project, which is always good to hear. But also to try to get at that kind of economic development side, the bid was able to ask businesses about their sales and how those had changed. And over 50% reported that their sales were either steady or had even increased relative to even pre-pandemic times. So that was a really nice factoid to have. Moving on to the next one, Lydia. In Salem, the city added separated bike lanes on each side of Wilson Street by narrowing the existing travel lanes, getting some paint on the ground, and installing flex posts. Salem was not the only community to implement bicycle improvements. And if you look at the national data, you can see that more and more people are just making biking a part of their lives. So bike sales as a country are up about 65%. And then if you look at e-bike sales, those are even crazier, up, something like 250%. So in this particular case, the primary metric that Salem was interested in was actually traffic calming and vehicle speeds. And so they were able to set up some speed counters both before and after the project was implemented, and saw an 8% drop in average vehicle speeds. And then more importantly, a very big drop, 61% in people driving over 40 miles an hour, when the risk of serious injury or even death due to a crash is very, very high. And this road connects to 2 schools. So that was a really great finding and a good thing to support the project. If you go to the next slide, we saw several communities make more space for people on transit. So whether that was through improving bus lanes, adding bus shelters, adding landing pads, adding crosswalks to bus shelters, or all of the above. In Everett, the city provided peak period outbound bus lanes. They got some really wonderful photos of those, which is, a great way, an easy way to kind of measure the impact of projects, but they also had some good data findings as well, finding that bus travel time dropped 30% even as overall traffic was coming back and actually increasing. And that saved time, serves thousands of riders in the peak hour. So really showing, the impact on individual people. If you go to the next slide, Lydia, as I'm sure many of you had in your communities, cities and towns found space on their streets for outdoor dining. This one is a little bit different. This is a short one-way street, Railroad Street, I believe in Great Barrington, that was actually fully closed down during peak periods like Friday evening and Saturday evening to become a well-spaced out, socially distanced space for 125 people to sit and eat. So that count of seats here is really important because it's showing how sort of a relatively small space in your downtown can suddenly become public space for, over 100 people. In surveys that were conducted with communities around Massachusetts, and you'll see this in the report, but, 3/4 of people said that they supported converting outdoor spaces for dining and shopping, that sort of thing. So that's, some really good background data as well. If you go to the final slide, in Foxborough, the town undertook a 9-week pilot around their town common, where they changed travel flow to try to channelize traffic and make it a bit safer and also create space for people to walk where there really wasn't any before. And what the town wound up doing was going out in person and doing some surveys in order to hear from a wide range of people instead of just those who sort of took to their keyboards in revolt against this design. And that was really good as it gave the city council kind of a better understanding overall of the project. So now I'm going to turn it over to Lydia, who's going to talk about some of the tools we used in this report and how they can fit into your shared streets and spaces or other types of projects.
Thanks so much, Liza. So I wanted to first just start by emphasizing that the majority of the tools that we use to get the results that Liza just talked about were collected using pretty simple and repeatable tools, and share a few details on ways we hope that folks on this call and throughout the Commonwealth will be able to collect and report data for the next round of projects. So first, one tool we used, as Liza mentioned, was intercept surveys. We stationed ourselves or our municipal partners, or in some cases, community organizers that were involved in the project out on the street to talk with people who are passing by. And these are great because they're short. They are 1 to 2 minute interactions with folks, and they can be used with people who are walking, people who are biking, business owners or workers, people who are maybe waiting for a seat on an outside parklet. And you can collect quite a bit of data that way. And while a more rigorous survey campaign can be done, you can also get quite a bit of good data in just a few hours when activity is at its highest. And we also saw some folks implement online versions of these same surveys. So people have gotten pretty used to QR codes throughout the pandemic, and you could pair that in-person survey with a QR code that would link somebody to basically the same exact 1 to 2 minute survey online to supplement your results as well. And just a quick point on intercept surveys, or kind of any surveys you're doing as part of projects, we do recommend including 1 to 3 demographic questions that can help you with disaggregation of results to get a sense of who you're hearing from and also who you're not hearing from. Another thing we did was just take the time to quantify the physical space changes that were implemented, and these can be done, really quite easily using plans that are created or on-street measurements. So tally up the number of new crosswalks and accessible ramps that you've installed. Take a look at the reductions to your crosswalk lengths and the reduction to pedestrian exposure, how street changes affected the percentage of the street that is dedicated to each mode of transportation, and how that might support some broader goals that you have as a community. And one of the ones that Liza mentioned, of course, was just how many seats for people were created, and what that trade-off was for whatever was there before. Speed studies were one of our most effective tools. We collected speed data for quite a few communities, both before and after installation, to get a sense of what the impact does. And you can collect speed data for quite cheap with an outsourced company, but also many towns actually do have their own in-house equipment that you can use. So we recommend coordinating across departments to see if that's something you have in-house. But again, the cost is pretty nominal, just a few $100s, and also can be covered by the Shared Streets and Spaces grant if you want to include that in your grant application. So speed reduction is a major goal of your project. Plan ahead to get that before data and prepare to get after data once there's been a little bit of time for folks to acclimate to the new design. We also tend to get several days of data in a row to help ensure that our data is reliable and can account for any kind of weird day-to-day anomalies. And with that data in place, it's relatively easy to get a few quick and important stats. So just from a basic speed data set, you should be able to quickly get any changes in speed, and particularly dangerous speeds, those over 30 or 40 miles an hour, in addition to changes in user volumes to see if you've actually kind of attracted any new users, say if you have a bike lane that was installed as part of a project. And then another interesting and easy to evaluate metric that we used was an analysis of crosswalk yield rates. So this is going to measure the experience of a person who's trying to cross the street and how many vehicles pass before someone stops and they're able to enter the street to make their crossing. And because speed and sightlines are such a major factor that affect drivers' ability to see and then react and stop for someone who's waiting to cross the street, doing some of these before and after observations can be a great way to do some crosswalk specific evaluation. And then finally, we took a look at quality of service metrics for transit with a particular focus on transit travel time. This information is automatically collected by buses as they're making their way around town every day, and some coordination with the MBTA here can yield some pretty incredible results if you're looking to track your transit improvements if you've installed something like a bus lane. This isn't on my list, but I tried to emphasize it here. Before after photos are also a great tool. We really recommend taking the time to set up some before photos and then get that same shot afterward, and making sure that you're getting photos that are in good light, generally have people in them, I think are really effective at communicating the impacts of what you've done for your community. So I just wanted to quickly mentioned that there are a lot of existing resources that are already out there that don't require any additional collection of your own kind of proprietary data. And so wanted to just quickly share these in case folks aren't aware of them. The first is just your existing planning documents and analyses, especially for before data. If you haven't had a chance to do kind of strict before analyses, you may have data that's already been really gone through as part of existing complete streets prioritization plans or your bike or pedestrian plans. If you have those comprehensive plans, safety audits for specific streets, things like that. So recommend just going back through the files and seeing if there's anything that you can use to help bolster an evaluation of your project. The Mass Mobility Dashboard is a tool that's online where there's continuous monitoring of the impacts of COVID-19 on the state's transportation network. And there's a wide range of metrics relating to traffic volumes, speeds, all kinds of ridership activity. So recommend checking that out. Transit Matters has an MBTA recovery dashboard that tracks ridership and service across all MBTA services, including all the bus lines, subway, ferry, et cetera. So that's a great tool for anyone who's got a transit specific project. Blue Bikes also publishes activity monthly. They usually come out a little bit after the first of the month, but if you have bike lanes that were installed and you want to see if there were any new uptick in activity related with those, you could check that out. And also some folks actually used their grants to install blue bike stations. So Salem and I believe Newton took advantage of that in theirs, and that data is definitely there for folks to use. And then finally, Streetlight provides free county level VMT. This is crowdsourced big data, and you can get county level free traffic insights on their website, which can be helpful if you're looking to pair, for example, changes in your transit travel time with maybe what general traffic trends are like in the region. I know that we're going to have a little bit of a discussion later on, but if folks want to drop any other resources you have used as part of evaluations in the chat, I think that would be great to hear from folks what you have been using in your community beyond those that I've listed. So with that, I wanted to just share a few takeaways from the last several rounds of working on these projects. The first is just that shared streets really unlocked collective imagination across the state of what can be done and on what time frame, and I would encourage people to lean into that creativity and flexibility. I think that this is really a win across the state that we've seen people try out new materials, try out new processes, and we're able to implement things that people didn't necessarily think were possible previously and on really quick time frames. So just encourage people to lean in. The second is honesty in limitations. and being upfront about what your project can deliver. So by this, I mean, taking the time to think through the limits of your project in terms of size and scale, impact, and longevity. And this can be really helpful from the outset in terms of getting a project implemented that is kind of fully thought through from start to finish. So shared trees and spaces projects can be super exciting, and we've seen that their impacts can be quite incredible, even at a relatively small price tag. But there's a few different considerations I think are important to come up, to think through from the beginning. And I'll give just a few examples. The first is just from a built environment standpoint, that it can be challenging for these projects to uphold the spirit of accessibility for all. I think that over the past 20 months, my colleagues and I have had a lot of discussions about whether a temporary installation that technically meets ADA is upholding the spirit of an act that is intended to make our public spaces really inclusive. We've seen some data from across the country that shares that disabled respondents to surveys are generally still very supportive of these projects, but tend to be lower for those that don't have a physical disability. And so really just taking the time to think through and incorporate the kind of highest and best of our ability to make these spaces fully inclusive. In addition, while these projects are relatively low cost to construct, they do take real time and energy on the part of your municipal staff. And early collaboration with the full range of departments that are going to be involved in implementing these, I think is really important to make sure that once you get your grant in place, you're able to act on implementing it. It's really important just to acknowledge the time and effort it's going to take and plan accordingly for it. I'd also just say that on this regard, that projects that have a strong community or business partner are also really helpful to generate more support, volunteer labor, and ability to do some of that evaluation that Liza was talking about at the beginning. Okay, last point. I think we've seen widespread adoption of shared streets projects, and the results of these simple interventions really, to me, show me something bigger, which is that quick and creative tools should really be called upon for catalyzing long-term change. These projects are effective for addressing, or at the very least, sparking widespread discussion about ongoing quality of life issues like safety, traffic safety, high quality transit service, and definitely climate change. And so I just encourage everyone to consider how your shared streets projects can definitely address acute pandemic related needs, but also help catalyze movement around some of the ongoing issues that you're also seeing in your community. So with that, I just remind folks that the full report is available at streetimpactma.org, and I'm going to pass it over to Kate.
Right. Thank you, Lydia. You unshare. Let's make sure I can do this. All right, folks, can you see that? Yes, okay. Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. Thank you so much for gathering for this. It is so exciting for me to be back here to be talking about shared streets. I have done several webinars with the good graces of MAPC on this topic. Always get huge crowds, lots of great questions. Love this topic and how much people respond to it. I do want to linger for just a second on my title slide to acknowledge the amazing partnership that we've had with the Bar Foundation and the Solomon Foundation and MAPC. Obviously, there are folks from all of those organizations here this morning, and in a long career in government, I have found this to be probably the most successful and most joyous collaboration between state government, local government, regional government, nonprofit, private sector, philanthropy. It's really been an incredible experience, and I'm happy that it's continuing to roll on. So I imagine a lot of folks here have either seen me speak on these issues before or are familiar with all of this, but I always do like to just take us back to the beginning, where the shared streets concept started, which was really at the very beginning of the pandemic. We at MassDOT, like everybody else, were trying to figure out some way that we could do something that might be helpful. And we were really inspired by things that we saw going on in some cities around the world, using the streets that were suddenly empty of cars to either implement longstanding ideas around better bicycle and pedestrian accessibility, inclusivity for more folks, or coming up with completely new ideas to do things that they'd never really thought about before, like eating outside in cold climates or suddenly moving civic activities outside. And we very quickly, much more quickly than we typically do things, with the help again of a lot of folks on this call, pivoted to establish a new grant program modeled in part on other programs we have, like the Complete Streets program, but essentially to push money as quickly as we could to our cities and towns. to use their streets, to use their curbs, to use their parking areas, to use their plazas, to help themselves in whatever way they needed. And as Lydia said, to try maybe to lay down some new ways of thinking about streets that could stick around into the future. To date, we have spent much more money than we ever expected. We started with 5 million. We're now up to 33, and that has paid for 310 projects in 183 municipalities and 4 public transit agencies. All numbers I'm super proud of. Big point I want to make today, big part of the reason we're all here. We are opening a new grant round January 10th. That's Monday. If not Monday, it will be Tuesday, but we're hoping for Monday. Please, everybody consider applying, and please spread the word, because we want to make this a really bang up round with just lots of great projects, lots of projects and lots of great projects. So as I think everybody before me has said, photos are a huge part of this program. They're a huge part of kind of explaining to people all of the different things that shared streets can be. These are just a few of the thousands that we have. They always make me happy to look at. I will encourage everybody, please take pictures, whether you're doing a project through MassDOT or just on your own. And please take pictures with people. I have lots and lots of pictures of nice sidewalks taken at dawn with nobody. And it's always great to see people actually using and enjoying and kind of showing us how the new facilities can make a big difference in communities. So people are probably familiar, but the program funds several major project categories. We are going to continue to fund all of these going forward. Basically, the main categories are ones that make changes to streets and curbs and plazas and parking to kind of take normal commercial, restaurant, business, civic activities outdoors. This was a huge point of emphasis at the beginning of the pandemic, has continued to be in certain ways, something we want to continue to support because we know how popular it is. The core of the program probably is the second, which is changes to our streets to make them safer, more inclusive, more multimodal. We cover lots and lots of different kinds of interventions from big to small that relate to these things. Hope to see many more coming in. The third is bus facilities. We had a bunch of references to those earlier. The bus lanes, like the picture from Everett, those are obviously sort of the biggest, most visual, but we have also funded lots of bus shelters with heaters, which I think is really great, particularly now that it's winter. Crosswalks to bus shelters, trash cans at bus shelters. It's not just the big bus lanes. It can be other things that can be helpful in almost any community. And the last is something I really want to emphasize because it started to pick up steam in the last rounds, but we would love to see more this time, which is the capital costs of bike share equipment and scooter share equipment. I saw a question in the chat about whether it has to be blue bikes. It does not. We have supported other companies, well, not really other companies, but other towns to sort of work with other companies on other types of sharing. So that, we are flexible on that. We would love to see more of that. We also know for communities in the inner core who maybe want to work with the MBTA that can be challenging because there are fees associated with doing that. We are ready and willing to cover those fees if that helps to get more blue bikes and other shared bikes close to transit. So please, if anyone has any inkling of interest in that, think about it and reach out to us if we can be helpful. Love the map, kind of like the photos. It's the real visual of the program, of its reach, of the different types of communities that have been part of this. Always love to see the map get filled up more, but I'm really just blown away by where we are, given that many of our grant programs tend to sort of speak to the needs of specific types of places. It's really cool how broad this one has been. So Lydia and Liza talked some about observations and lessons learned, a couple from our side, from the sort of program management. The first one probably will not come as a surprise to anybody here, but there's a tremendous appetite and need at the municipal level to improve streets, improve public spaces. There's a ton of creativity, there's a ton of innovation, a lot more tolerance for risk than I might have expected. And there's a lot of need for flexible funding. We know that in the world of government, much funding comes with specific types of things on which it should be spent. We have tried intentionally to make shared streets as flexible as we can, and we understand that is helpful. I think Lydia mentioned this. We have seen that the projects that tend to be the most successful are ones that were considered at some point in the past prior to COVID or prior to the application. Not always. But that just means that they have kind of a higher level of public awareness and public support. Again, the ones that have been, I think, the most successful are ones that do push things a little bit, but not too far. We've had a very small number, to my surprise, a very small number, but a couple of communities with significant pushback. And I think those were ones that just got a little too far out in front of kind of where people were, and maybe there wasn't sufficient public process to help get them comfortable. But again, we see it just an amazing amount of support for these projects, much more than is often the case. We have found on our side, and we have certainly heard this reflected back to us, that the speed and simplicity of the program, both the speed for us of being able to process applications and then the speed with which projects could be implemented, has been really helpful, and we agree with that. Also, the urgency and just the strange circumstances that we've all been in, I think have helped to focus us all on kind of new needs or old needs that just sort of hadn't found space before, but do now. Nevertheless, and I will talk about this more, and I'm happy to answer questions, we know that many municipalities ran into challenges with implementation. Many projects that we funded are not fully complete. Most of them are close or are partially, but supply chain materials have been a big challenge. Sometimes other things. We know, we're sympathetic, we're flexible. If you're having trouble, please communicate with us. The last point I wanted to make too is that shared streets and similar efforts have really sparked a lot of interest at the state level in our downtowns, our town centers, our streets, our plazas, places that we've always looked at, but maybe never seen or never thought that they could be used differently. These are now seeming like they really have the potential to catalyze some bigger change and bigger positive change in the Commonwealth. We in New England have a lot of natural attributes, right? And we have these places that are walkable and human scale, that have been used for these kinds of purposes, in some cases for centuries. And we really want to use them again, to promote stability, community cohesion, fight climate change, as we've talked about, new housing, new connections, new mobility. Lots of things can come out of this. And I think everybody should look. You'll be hearing more from state government on this, probably looking to you for some of your support. But please do keep watching, because I think there's going to be some exciting stuff coming. So probably the meat of what people are interested in, what's happening with the new round, opening very early next week, hopefully Monday. Applications will be due in early March, awards in the April timeframe. As I say at the bottom, we expect another grant round probably in the summer, depending on how quickly we can process this stuff. We have created a new project category, yay, which is specific to the purchase of equipment. We know there's a lot of interest in things like flashing beacons and bike racks and tactile strips and cones and all kinds of things that I probably can't think of right now. So if a town can put together an application for something like that for under $50,000, and it basically meets what we're looking for, we're not really going to score it. It's not really going to have to compete. We want to push money out for these kinds of purchases. So please do be thinking about that in addition to kind of bigger projects. And if a municipality gets one of those awards, it does not knock you out of consideration for one of the other categories. We're kind of holding this separate because we think it's important and hopefully relatively easy. A couple of other areas of emphasis. The first big one is about speed and safety. We at MassDOT have been doing a lot of work on this, and Jackie will talk about it next. But really trying to drill down on the connection between vehicular speeds and the safety of everybody using our roads. And there are so many projects that are funded by shared streets that speak to some of these issues that we really wanted to kind of draw it out and emphasize it more. And we will be doing that in this round. We have extra money this time for public transit, so please do bring us your transit projects. Again, the bike and scooter share, something we would love to see more of. And we are giving a new bonus point this time, which is for municipalities that are part of the Housing Choice Program. And we would love to see applications that provide connections either to new housing or to other kinds of multifamily housing that are in walkable areas. One thing, maybe not quite such good news, we are transitioning away from giving money upfront to our more typical reimbursement funding mechanism, which I assume everybody's familiar with because we use it for practically everything else. Being able to put money out upfront, I think, was extremely important at the beginning of the program. It helped to jumpstart a lot of projects when we knew that cities and towns were just incredibly strapped with the crisis of COVID. But we have found over time, particularly as municipalities have struggled to implement projects, in a timely way, that we just have too much money out that has not been spent, and it's making it difficult for us to keep track of it and be confident that we're sort of being the right stewards of public money that we should be. So I'm happy to answer questions on that, but that is going to be a change. Again, we want to go big. We want to see every kind of project, every kind of community, lots of ideas. There are other state grant programs as well. We can help shunt applications in different directions if something's not quite right for shared streets. Also, the MVP program through Energy and Environmental Affairs, which helps municipalities look at resilience and climate vulnerability issues. They will also be opening around, I believe, in January. So something to keep your eyes open for. And again, we hope to do this again in the spring, early summer, depending on how things go. And I will invite Jackie to speak to this slide and sort of specifically to what we're thinking of around the speed management issues. Hopefully Jackie is still here.
Oh, hi everyone.
Hi.
Here I am. Hi everyone, Jackie DeWolf from the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. So as Kate noted, one area of emphasis is roadway safety and speed management. In conjunction with releasing the next round of shared streets and spaces, we're going to be also releasing a new resource around safe speeds and our approach to speed management, and some information and technical toolkit for communities. Sadly, roadway fatalities are on the rise. In 2021, we had the highest number of people killed in crashes in the past more than a decade, and thousands more people seriously injured. So just want everyone to sit with that for a moment. It's already a difficult time. This is in response to COVID and a global pandemic. And additionally, we are facing a crisis on our roadways and trends in the wrong directions, and thousands more people seriously injured, and with just people trying to get to where they want to go. So keeping people safe on all roadways is MassDOT's priority. One life lost or altered is unacceptable. And one of the primary factors in these crashes is speed. Speed both leads to more serious and fatal crashes, and speed also deters people from using our roadways, making people feel safe walking and biking and just going outside. So MassDOT is adopting a safe system approach proven to reduce serious injuries and fatalities, moving away from just focusing on human behavior and actually designing for human mistakes, kind of acknowledging people will make mistakes that can lead to crashes, but when crashes do happen, we have the ability to help reduce the chance that results in death or serious injury, moving away from individual responsibility and shared responsibility between users and people who design and manage roadways, and moving away from just reacting to crash history and crash hotspots, and more towards proactively identifying and addressing risk areas to prevent crashes and making roadways comfortable for all. And I think through a lot of the examples we just saw earlier, we're already doing it. Communities are doing this across the Commonwealth with our support and funding, and many times, also without, and through lots of other programs like Complete Streets and Mass Trails and many others to support this work. But we really want to continue to, focus on safety. And there's many components of a safe system approach. And so lots of applications might touch on different aspects. But in particular, one key component that we've been focusing on this past year is around safe speeds. And that if a person driving at 40 miles per hour hits a person walking, the likelihood that that person walking would die or be seriously injured is 73%, and is significantly reduced. A person driving 20 miles per hour, the likelihood reduces to 13%. And so with each 1 mile per hour increase that a person drives, it can be attributed to a 3% increase in potential loss of life. And speed impacts both the driver, passengers, people outside vehicles, really everyone on our roadways. And the really great thing about a lot of these projects is that it's making roads more comfortable safer for everyone, people using it today, but then also people who could use it for commerce, business, walking, biking, wheelchair, strollers, bus, access to transit. So last year, we launched a listening tour to learn national best practices, hear from people across Massachusetts to inform our work. We evaluated what we do and what we could do. And one significant thing that we learned is how much we need to improve, our communications around our approach to speed. So next week, we're releasing this new resource on the mass.gov website. There'll be a direct link through the Shared Streets grant program. And we really encourage you to check it out and use it as a resource in your work and in your applications. It goes into detail about speed management, establishing a target speed, roadway treatment, technical toolkit, and the role of speed limits. So just briefly, at target speed, we go into detail is this notion that target speed is the highest operating speed at which drivers should operate, ideally on a roadway in a specific context. So that's regardless of today's speed limit or speeding data. It's really taking a fresh look at saying, okay, in this roadway context, what is safe, and based on that, what are physical changes, what are different roadway treatments that can be done to help achieve that target speed. And then with the goal that streets become self-enforcing, reducing speed-related conflicts and serious injuries, both through separation as well as separation of users, as well as slowing speeds and traffic calming. So check out the resource, utilize the technical toolkit. The applications specific to speed will ask you for additional information on current speeds, because we will also ask grant recipients to collect after data. Funding isn't contingent on the results of the data. It's more just a way for us to learn and put together more helpful resources in the future. And so that when you finish a project and we say, hey, provide this before data, we actually already have it after an intervention, and have more information like the information you saw Lydia present earlier about before-after studies. But again, it's not a full engineering speed study. It's more basic information that's readily available. So just to wrap up, adjusting speed is really critical to meeting Commonwealth safety, equity, and mobility goals. When we do release the Safe Speed site, we need your continued input. It's an iterative process, so we can all be working together to realize safer speeds everywhere, and please provide feedback. And then, of course, safety and speed is an emphasis, but it's not the only focus of Shared Streets and Spaces grant program. Again, as Kate said, broadly about main streets, bike networks, pedestrian facilities, accessibility, inclusion, transit, commerce, and more. So with that, in closing, I'll go to the next slide. The information will be released on the mass.gov website, Shared Streets and Spaces grant program. And then if you have any questions, I know this presentation will be shared after this webinar, but then don't hesitate to reach out to the Shared Streets email address, sharedstreets@dot.state.ma.us, and the program team will answer any questions that you have. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Jackie and Kate and Liza and Lydia. That was fabulous. So now we have some time for questions. I know there have been a number of questions in the chat, and I want to thank Cassandra Gascon from MassDOT for answering a lot of those questions. But feel free to put some more questions in the chat, or if you want to use the raise your hand function, I can call on you. I saw a number of sort of questions about e-bikes. I can say that is something MAPC is also involved in. There is a few bills in the legislature to try to clarify sort of the definition of electric bikes. And we know that some municipalities have had some challenges in wanting to proactively promote them because of that lack of clarity and potential liability issues. And that is something that MAPC we are working on with some of the advocacy groups and others as well. And happy to talk, offline with anyone more about that. There was also a question about sort of taking parking and flex posts and just dealing with sometimes in general departments of public works locally that have challenges with some of those issues. I feel free if anyone else wants to respond to those or how they navigated some of those issues locally. I think those are great, great peer-to-peer kind of responses that could be there. And there have been a number of questions just sort of about the application process. One I thought that was good question from Laura Weiner is the deadline for spending and implementing these funds is June 30th, 2023. So that gives folks enough time to be able to put an application together and be able to actually implement the project. Let's see, let me go to the chat right now.
Eric, if you don't mind if I chime in.
Please.
Hey everyone, this is Cassandra from MassDOT. I work with Kate and Jackie on this program. I just wanted to touch on Daniel's question because I think I only spoke to part of it. He had asked, he had asked what the project budget limits are. And so those vary by project type. We've got our 5 different project types. So all of this information, again, will be updated on our website when we launch on Monday. So if you're looking right now, you may see different project types, you may see different grant limits. But for this upcoming grant round, for the speed management project type, which really speaks to everything that Jackie just talked about, we have a $200,000 grant limit. For the pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure project type, which is more of those typical like shared streets projects, we have a $200,000 grant limit. For the transit supportive infrastructure, the better buses, the new facilities for buses and things like that, that is a $500,000 grant limit. And for main streets, that outdoor dining, outdoor programming category is up to $100,000. And then again, we have that new equipment only project type, which is $50,000. And I just want to reiterate that any municipality may submit up to 2 applications per round and be awarded one award per round. However, the equipment only project type does not count towards either of those limits. So theoretically, you could be awarded an equipment only project and a, let's say, speed management project for different areas, different amounts. And in essence, you could also apply for, you could also submit, say, maybe 3 applications. Maybe you're submitting 1 equipment only, 1 speed management, and 1 pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. You could only be awarded 1 actual grant and then 1 equipment only award. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Cassandra. That was great. So just quickly, I see there are lots of questions coming into the chat about equipment. This is brand new to us too, as of a couple days ago. So it's actually really helpful to get these questions. We will be working on a list of eligible equipment, which is not to say that if somebody came up with something that we hadn't thought about, that we feel like really does sort of address the core spirit of this program, that we would potentially consider that. We did make a decision, and I think we're going to most likely stick to this, that things like cones and jersey barriers that are just really basic equipment that can be used for lots and lots of different things, we probably don't want to support those. Not that they're bad things, but they're not sort of specific enough to what we're trying to do here. But again, some idea out of the box that we're not thinking of, please do bring it to us. In terms of snow removal, we would love to see municipalities buying snow removal equipment that's specifically targeted at sidewalks and other pedestrian facilities. Not really sort of vehicular plows for standard roadways, but more atypical equipment to help keep spaces clear for walkers and cyclists. Like, yes, absolutely. In terms of the quad gates, we've not gotten one of those in the past. And I guess I would want to know more about what line and what collaboration has happened with the railroads. But yes, conceivably, if it can be demonstrated that it would really improve a pedestrian corridor, yes, potentially.
Are there any other questions, either that folks who might have posted something in the chat want more clarification on, or any things that we haven't covered? Nicholas Russo.
Hi, yeah, Nick Russo from Berkshire Regional Planning Commission. Just curious for like Better Bus grants, can those go directly towards transit agencies, or is it through a municipality still who would receive those funds?
No, transit agencies are eligible applicants. So we definitely encourage the transit agency itself to apply.
Great. Thank
In some cases, they're done in partnership, but yes, absolutely.
Great.
Sue Bass.
Hi, I'm from just a resident of Belmont, and we have some very small streets that we have been trying to figure out effective ways to especially keep Waze drivers from using. And I don't know that any of the things that you suggest, it's not equipment, it's some more thoughtful design, it might be some changes in rules and so on. But this is the kind of thing that we need help on. We have these one-lane streets that are traffic in both directions. And some of them you can't see whether there's someone coming, a small child standing in the road. I don't know that speed management does anything unless, the roads are so narrow that you can kill a child at 10 miles an hour, if, and seriously injure somebody if you can't see that there's somebody there. So we're looking for some advice, some help. Is there someone at DOT who would like to come talk to us about this? Come and walk these streets and see what solutions they can come up with?
So actually, I'll answer a couple of questions at once here. So first of all, I grew up in Belmont, so and a lot of cities and towns actually have those kinds of very small, narrow, old, in many cases, roads. So I guess the first thing I will say is, yes, we are again offering technical assistance with great thanks to the Bar Foundation and to Lydia and Liza and their colleagues. So for a case like this one and others where there's sort of an identified problem, but not necessarily an identified solution, they will be a great resource to help think through options. One other thing I would say, just sort of specific to this question, and there was a picture, I think in Lydia's presentation from Arlington, where they actually either closed some streets. We have a lot of examples of streets closed to vehicles or significantly slowed using signage and cones and tables, depending on what kind of street. So it takes willingness and will on the part of the municipality, but there certainly are ways to make streets sort of less welcoming to vehicles in the name of making them safer for children and walkers and everybody else. So I would definitely encourage everyone, take advantage of the technical assistance. There are solutions out there. We can help you find them. And yeah, I'll stop there. But yes, terrific question. Thank you.
Why don't we go to Jeremy?
Thanks, Eric. Jeremy Devaney, I'm the rising president of the Marshfield Chamber of Commerce and chair of our Economic Development Committee. I was curious, is there any limitation on non-municipal applicants to these programs? And is there any limitation on the number of applicants from a single municipality? So could we apply in addition to the town, or do we have to apply through one of our town sponsors? No, so applicants have to be municipalities or transit agencies. And essentially what's going on is that the applicant has to own or somehow control the infrastructure for which the intervention is proposed. So that's kind of the deal. But we have many, many successful examples of chambers of commerce and bids and all kinds of civic organizations working with municipalities to develop applications. How exactly the projects get implemented once the money goes to the town or the approval goes to the town, that's sort of up to whatever is going on at the local level. But the municipality does have to be the applicant, because that's sort of how we assure ourselves that the project will get implemented and it's being done by the people who have the authority to do so. Fantastic. Appreciate the feedback, Katie. Just one other follow-up, and I know Bill asked in the questions over there. For communities that are outside of the metro region and are still governed by a bifurcated governance system, we've got a board of public works, we've got a board of selectmen. They can control, one controls policy, the other controls capital projects, right? Do you folks have any recommendations for those of us out in these less controlled suburban areas, less centralized politically suburban areas, how we can navigate some of these larger capital projects that get stymied by this bifurcated system?
So that's, in some ways, that's a question that might be better offline, not because it's sensitive, but just to get some more of the details. I guess what I will say generally is that lots of municipalities have similar situations and similar setups. I have been surprised at how many seem to have successfully navigated it for this program. I'm not going to say that we haven't run into problems. Occasionally we've approved grants and only later found out that the DPW didn't even know about it. And that the point about sort of coordination before submitting the grant is really important. I think you also might be able to get some assistance from the TA teams who've probably seen it all at this point in terms of kind of governance and how that affects both applying and implementing projects. But happy to brainstorm offline if that's helpful, but also just to say that you have lots of company and there are ways to manage these things. And I'm sure also your RPA and the folks at MAPC could help as well, because this is a very common situation.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Katie.
Thank you, Jeremy. Just going back to the chat, Cassandra, I know you've responded to a number of things here. Do you want to add anything to any of the questions there? I know there was one question about whether grants could be available for feasibility or design or only for construction.
Oh, I must have missed that one. Sorry about that. No. Well, kind of, I guess, maybe is the better response. So if you're applying for a project and you know that you want to incorporate some type of evaluation after the fact into the project, you need to include that in your original project request. And I believe we have a rule that it cannot take up more than 10% of the total project cost. So in that sense, yes, but for anything else in terms of more in-depth design, that's something that the free technical assistance offered through the Bar Foundation would be more suited to assist with.
Yeah, and I mean, we have gotten all kinds of requests for all different types of soft costs. And in some cases, if they're below the 10%, we will allow it. But things like feasibility studies, like, no, this is really intended to be kind of like tactical, fairly quick implementation, not a lot of design kinds of interventions. So that would not be appropriate for this program. The Commonwealth does offer other grant programs that can support planning, but not as much this one.
And then there was a question about, again, about snow removal. What categories of funding could be used for the plow that could be used for clearing sidewalks? I assume that's the equipment category. If a municipality was requesting, some type of a snow clearance equipment.
Yes, although I'm going to say that with actually admitting I don't actually know how much a Bobcat would cost or something like that. The other thing I will say, so last winter when we did a grant round, we were open to the idea of paying for sidewalk or similar pedestrian path snow removal equipment if it was sort of packaged with a project like the construction of a new sidewalk or like the construction of a new trail that was actually providing like new pedestrian access for which the snow removal equipment would be useful. In the end, we didn't get any that like really kind of brought them together. So I would suggest that folks think about that. But if there's sort of specific questions around sort of specific types of equipment, please do talk to us. But yes, to Eric's point, that would be the kind of logical category for it.
Great. Any other questions or questions in the chat that folks would like elaboration on?
Eric, I have a question for our hosts, actually. I just got a direct message wondering if the chat will be available along with the recording after the fact, just given that there's been a lot of good questions and answers going on there.
That's a good question. Allison and Jessica, can we download the chat and also post the questions and answers as well?
Yes, we will follow up after this webinar and make the PowerPoint presentations, the recording available online on the MAPC website, and also send an email out on early next week once the MassDOT website is ready for more detailed information about this grant initiative.
And the recording will include the chat as well.
Yes.
Great. Okay.
And I will say also, as we've said, the website will be going live early next week. I know lots of people will probably go there today. Much of the information remains the same, but please do continue to check back next week, because there will be updates around some of these new project categories, around some of the funding mechanisms. We made lots of sort of small adjustments based on things that we've learned over the last 2 almost years. So please, starting Monday, hopefully it will be, all the new stuff will be there. And the FAQs include a lot of this stuff as well, and we can add to it too.
I see a question from, is it Julian?
Yes, it's Julianne. Thank you. So the speed safety studies that you will be offering, I'm just wondering if there's information right now. I posted this into the chat, and I'm sorry if someone answered and I didn't see, but I think I was wondering if there's more detailed information about size of vehicle and how that applies to the miles per hour and the injury relation. I mean, I think, if a bicycle hits someone, I assume that's very different than a large truck. Can someone talk about that?
Jackie, I will look to you for that.
Yeah. So the data that we have from Federal Highway and other research and sources is generic, but with the caveat that larger vehicles, heavier vehicles, certainly increases the risk, and then is further increased by, everything. I mean, yes, the heavier vehicle, the larger the vehicle, the greater the risk. And then for people, it exponentially increases too for, children and people more vulnerable and susceptible to injury, whether that's older adults, children. So I don't know what additional specific information you're looking for, but feel free to follow up or ask a follow-up question.
Okay, thank you. I'll follow up later. Thank you so much.
I saw a question also about equipment and installation. Our intention had been really just to pay for the equipment itself and then kind of leave it to municipal resources, either employees or contractors, to install it. Again, this is a new category, so I'm interested in the feedback. If people tell us that makes it completely impossible, then that would be something we would take on board. But the intention really is just to kind of purchase the stuff so that we can, get our help out there that way.
Exactly. And I was just typing out a response to Jacob there as well to say that, if there are going to be installation costs or labor costs, then I would wrap that up into a different project type, and a larger project.
Thank you. There's also a question about, can an applicant apply twice under different categories if there's a 2 limit and they really want to highlight their interest? Can they apply twice, basically the same project under multiple categories?
No.
They
all get looked at by the same people.
I understood that question to mean, could I submit 2 different, for example, speed management projects?
Oh, that would be then yes.
Which, but you can only be awarded 1. So in that sense, I think in most cases, it really does make sense to talk to everybody in your municipality and put forth 1 priority project. Because if you submit 2, we're going to pick which one gets awarded, if any.
And Maria, feel free to raise your hand if you want to elaborate on that question. Let's see.
So yes, we do allow DPW forces to work on these projects, absolutely. If you are going to use a contractor, they need to follow state procurement rules the way all of our grant programs do, but in terms of municipal staff, absolutely. That's often the fastest way to get stuff done.
There's another question about cultural creative elements such as asphalt art be considered favorably in project applications. For example, we worked with the city of Chelsea to install some asphalt art using thermoplast while also providing crosswalk improvements.
Yeah, so we have seen a lot of applications that have art elements. If the art is really fully integrated into what is essentially a mobility or safety project, then yes, we will support it up to a point. What we have tended to find has been more successful is that the MassDOT grant covers the sort of infrastructure, mobility, placemaking pieces, and then a local community organization or school or philanthropy comes in for the art side. Art's not really our sort of like thing. But many projects do include art. Many of the projects in the photos we showed include art. We understand the ways in which that they can make things better. We have definitely paid for different types of paving materials, although we do not pay for brick sidewalks. But I think I would just emphasize that, it's got to be transportation or mobility or safety first, and then maybe an art or cultural or community element sort of following. But again, happy to try to take on specific questions.
And just to add on to that, anything funded through this program, as well as our state programs like Complete Streets, would need to be MUTCD compliant, which is typically why we aren't able to fund those art components. And then I see another question from Mark. He asks, please clarify that new bike accommodation may include existing pedestrian walks converted or enlarged. Yes, if let's say you're widening a sidewalk from 3 feet to a 10 or 12 foot shared use path, yeah, we would consider that a new bicycle accommodation.
Yeah, but we don't want bicycle or pedestrian existing facilities, or we don't want the capacity lost. In some cases, we had projects where outdoor dining was going into bike lanes or into walking space like that. That's not what we're looking for. But if you widen a sidewalk, take a bike lane in the process, and include new bike facilities as part of the project, yes, so long as you're maintaining the overall access.
There's another question about how many projects you'll be funding, and I assume that just depends on how many requests and the dollar amount that you all get. There's not a set number that you have already decided upon.
Excited to find out, though.
Right. And I will say, not to be self-serving, but the more good projects we get, odds are the more funding we may get. So quality does help. Quality and quantity help.
There's a new question about mobility services. Mobility on a broad scale with high concentration of seniors. Could mobility be broad enough to support food delivery to people homebound due to COVID, say subsidizing a Peapod delivery?
No, unfortunately, we can't pay for any type of operating expenses. These are really capital. We have certainly worked with a lot of organizations that focus on the needs of seniors, but on things like sidewalks and walking spaces and safer mobility, unfortunately, not that kind of a need.
I will say on that point, though, MAPC has a program where we have partnered. We actually have funding from Mass Development to partner with, to provide to municipalities and RTAs to partner with taxi companies, and food delivery is one of the eligible activities that we've had under that program. You can find that program on our website. Maybe Allison or Jessica could put that link into the chat, but we're happy to follow up separately on that with anyone who's interested in those types of issues.
And I know Mima was doing stuff.
Mara Holland just did that, who's managing that program.
Thank you, Mara.
Thank you, Mara. Let's see. Any other questions or ones that we need more clarification?
This is tremendously helpful for us. Thank you so much, everybody. And so excited to see the interest in the questions. It's really great. We were afraid everybody might have forgotten about the program since we went on hiatus for a little bit. So glad that that's not the case.
And Kate, just for clarification, so after this, the information you said will be, the website will be updated, and there will be a portal for people to provide questions there. And what is the deadline for submission?
Cassandra, is it March 1st?
Yep, March 1st,
And it will go live
Monday.
Monday. Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Cassandra, for stepping in and answering a lot of these questions. Thank you, Jackie and Liza and Lydia. And I also want to thank Allison Felix and Jessica Belanger at MAPC for helping to coordinate and manage this webinar. Really appreciate everyone's time and the questions. And we are hopeful for some great projects. So good luck on your applications. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.